In today's video, we'll be looking at UI sounds in games and apps. I'll give you a brief introduction to what UI sounds are, what are the types of UI sounds, how are they made, and last but not least we will discuss when certain UI sounds fit game or app, and what are the most important things to consider while making them. Sit back, relax, intro. UI sounds are all of the things we hear in games and apps when there is any kind of interaction between user and the interface. So all those clicks, confirmations, denials, selecting, hovering, and so on. To be more detailed, for example, in RPG games we have inventory sounds when you choose your weapons, armor, potions, spells, or when you are talking with someone and have to choose one of available options to move on with the dialogue and the quest. Those are all UI sounds. More examples? All menu sounds from choosing a submenu to saving your game. Going forward, backward, cancelling or accepting things. And one of the most recognizable UI sounds is this one. The two main types of UI sounds I recognize are synthetic and organic. Synthesized UI sounds are of course artificial, made within a plugin or with an instrument, and organic are based on recordings of existing things. Examples? You're welcome. Take any UI from any sci-fi game and you will for sure hear synthesized UI sounds. All those beeps and stuff. Organic sounds examples can be found in mentioned earlier RPG fantasy games, like one of my favorite ones. I like to divide synth UI sounds in two more categories: melodic and non-melodic. And what I mean by that is you can create UI sounds that can play along with the game's soundtrack or be totally not connected with your OST. If you want to make synthesized UI sound, you have to remember that synth generates tones and be sure to know your soundtrack key to avoid unwanted intervals between UI and music. Or to play with noise or other ways to synthesize sounds, to don't worry about being in the key. So as we know by now what types of UI sounds are there, we should be able to guess how we can make them. One of the way is doing it with a synth, for example, a virtual instrument. The most important thing when doing melodic UI sounds is to know the intervals from your root tone and what emotions they come with. If you want to know the basics of creating UI sounds using specific intervals, you can watch a video by Gravity Sound called How to Make UI Sounds for Games, where he talked nicely and briefly about all those things. There is no point of me duplicating his content here. When I think of making organic UI sounds, I usually look for short samples of characteristic things that we can see on the screen. So for example, the best way for me of making a sound of equipping a sword is to use a short sword hit or similar sound. For menu navigating, I usually try to use sounds that match the design, so sometimes the best option is to make something like page flipping and sometimes dragging a stone or opening an old drawer. For all the clicks, I usually want to use sounds with strong transients. So probably anything that makes these clicky sounds will be useful. Stapler, tucker, plastic boxes, doorknobs, and so on. Now we know what UI sounds are, what types of UI sounds are there, and we had a quick look on how they can be created. Now let's take a while to think about what makes UI sound good. First of all, we need to get familiar with game or app we are working on. What is the target group? What is the mood of the production? Is it a game full of joy or full of violence? Is it based in real world or in an imaginary one? Are there any characteristic elements of the world or of the main characters that can be intensified by your sounds? After doing research, after taking a look at screenshots or playing the first build of the game, you can start thinking about sounds that will match the visual and narrative content. Here are a few examples of how you can destroy player or user experience by choosing bad UI sounds. Knowing what we are working on and how easily you can enhance or destroy player experience with your UA sounds, we can summarize what we've talked about. Let's finish with my recommendations for a few genres and types of games. For action games like FPS, TPP, slashers with a lot of shooting, fighting, killing, explosions and all those big boy things, think about strong and heavy sounds. Don't be afraid to over-exaggerate. It's like guns in games and movies. Everybody likes those big sounds. For casual and kids games, consider soft, joyful ones. A good practice is using your mouth to make organic sounds for this type of games. For strategy and simulation games, try to keep it close to real sounds. It can boost the seriousness of the production. And usually for apps, it should be soft, self-explanatory sounds. Simple clicks and swooshes that will tell user that a certain action is done, like accept, pay or go back. Of course, I'm not talking here about all those communicator apps like WhatsApp or Messenger, which notification sounds can make you come back from the dead if not muted. Those are meant to be heard. And okay, I think that's all from me. I hope you were able to find some interesting hints here or just summarize your knowledge. If you enjoyed, remember about all those buttons down there. It really helps and gives satisfaction. Until next time.